Hi, I'm Micah Goodman. I write books, I think a lot about Israeli contemporary issues, and this is 18 questions, 40 Israeli thinkers from 1840.
We'll begin where we always do. As an Israeli and as a Jew, how are you feeling at this moment in Israeli history?
Well, this podcast is recorded about a few days after the end of the 12-day war. So it's quite a moment. It's a real moment, and it's hard to know what moment we're in now. But it feels like this might be a 6-day war moment, a moment that changed the Middle East and changed Israeli history. And as a person that's trying to observe history while it's happening, although it's impossible to see history while it's happening, I find this moment exciting, terrifying, and definitely, with a lot of promise, and definitely very interesting.
Interesting how?
It's just interesting. The world is becoming very interesting. Israel is interesting. The world is interesting. The Middle East is interesting. It's a pregnant moment. Now, I like that metaphor, pregnant, because I'm Israeli. It's not an Israeli moment. Harega shu be'hirayon. It's not an Israeli metaphor. But the idea that the pregnant could be a moment could be pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't know with what.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a pregnant moment. Now, will this lead to more peace in the Middle East, or more importantly, will this moment lead to more peace within Israel, between Israelis? These are very big questions.
Do you think it will?
I think it could go to many directions. That's what makes this moment very interesting.
What does it depend on?
Meaning, what does it depend if they'll have peace in the more peace
Well,
in
I
the
mean,
Middle East?
you said that it can go in different directions, and this moment's almost like at a fork in the road. So what does that depend on?
Well, how are we? I think this has been a real Israeli victory. This war has been Israeli victory.
Which war? Against Iran or against Hamas?
Well, again, since we're recording this, the war against Iran
Mm-hmm.
has been an incredible Israeli victory. Iran has tried to build what the octopus, a network of terrorist proxies surrounding Israel, so that in one day, when Israel is surrounded and isolated, it could press a button that unites all the fronts and destroys Israel.
Mm-hmm.
That was the grand plan of Iran. Now, obviously, we were surprised on October 7th, but I think in the past few months, we realized we were surprised again.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the deeper surprise. The deeper surprise is that we start to realize that what would have happened if Hezbollah would have attacked Israel all in, full-blown, in October 7th? What would have happened if that, and while they're attacking us from the north, doing to us much more than Hamas, the Radwan forces, were doing to us in the south, while Israel south is being conquered, as north is being conquered, we're also targeted with thousands of accurate missiles on strategic sites. The electricity, the central command locations, and Israel goes into chaos. What happens? The most probable scenario that this situation, Palestinians from the West Bank or Judea and Samaria would see that, feel that Israel is starting to go down, and as a Shabak person told me, that's the moment they join.
Mm-hmm.
And the violent parts of Israeli Arabs, the violent parts, will join. So you could imagine a scenario, a very high scenario, that has more than 50% probability of complete chaos that could lead to complete loss of control
Mm-hmm.
of Israel over the situation.
Mm.
Meaning, we were under existential threat, and here's the thing, we didn't know it. I mean, many Israelis knew that our neighbors want to destroy Israel. Some of us knew that they might have the guts to attack Israel, but I think none of us really knew that they actually have the capability.
Did you know it?
To do it. I didn't know it. Mm-hmm. That's why I call it the second surprise.
Mm.
The first surprise is that they attacked us. The second surprise starts kicking in throughout the war when you realize, oh my God. It turns out that we were under existential threat and we didn't know it. Israel was beneath a volcano.
Mm-hmm.
We were building our beautiful lives, which means every company in Israel is overvalued.
Mm.
The stock market of every company was overvalued. The rational decisions of people to make Aliyah was not like we were under real existential threat and we didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out that this war dismantled a threat that we didn't really knew.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, did some people in the Israeli intelligence, maybe some people theoretically knew it, but October 7th made that we could now imagine the real threat. So what happened in this war is we dismantled an existential threat, not a potential. The Iran nuclear is a potential existential threat, but in October 7th we were under real existential threat. Now, and so we dismantled that threat and the whole idea of surrounding Israel with proxies. And what Israel did was the following: Sinwar had a double gamble. He bet that Israel is very divided and that the Iran front of proxies is very united.
Mm-hmm.
So his bet was he'll attack Israel because it was 2023, judicial reform and all that. We were very divided. He'll attack us and we'll collapse into our own divisions. That was bet number one. Bet number two is when he'll attack us, Hezbollah will join. The proxies in Iraq will join. The Palestinians in Yehuda v'Shamron or West Bank, they'll join.
Mm-hmm.
Iran eventually will join. And what happened was he got his two gambles wrong. His two bets were wrong. Mm-hmm. He attacked us. He attacked us, and Israel didn't collapse into its divisions. It united. Mm-hmm. And their front did not unite. Mm-hmm. Israel had the privilege to fight Hamas without Hezbollah coming in all in, and then to fight Hezbollah without Iran saving Hezbollah, and then to attack Iran without Hezbollah helping out Iran. Mm-hmm. So we got to fight this one by one. And that's, by the way, why we had such significant victory. So he got his boat. He was betting on our division and their unity. What really happened is that we're much more united than they imagined. And it turns out that they're more divided, have less solidarity between themselves than we saw. So that was stage one of the war. The reason why I'm hopeful now is because we might moving into stage two.
So I actually want to talk about one of the wars that's ongoing, which is the Israel-Hamas war.
Yeah.
What do you think has been Israel's greatest success and greatest mistake?
The greatest success is that we knocked out all their leaders. Mm-hmm. That the whole leadership of Hezbollah is gone.
For Hamas specifically?
Hamas specifically, okay. Yeah.
I mean, you said Hezbollah, so I just wanted to
sorry. Yeah.
I don't know if that was a misspeak.
Issa, Randur, Def, Sinwar 1, Sinwar 2. We knocked down their leadership, which is tremendous achievement of the Israeli intelligence, military intelligence, and Shabak, and our operational forces. I don't really know how to measure that war. It's an impossible. This war, it was designed as a tragedy. Hamas designed the war in Gaza as a tragedy. Mm-hmm. When I say a tragedy, it means creating a situation where there is only bad options. Where I think the way Hamas understood this war is the following, the way it designed this war. There's an Israeli writer and thinker called Guy. He wrote a book called Tzva Haitek v'Tzva Parashim. Guy Chazut.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he wrote a great book, Tzva Haitek, Tzva Parashim, a great analysis of the weaknesses of the Israeli military. Uh-huh. And he says there are actually two are so. But I won't go into his thesis. But he has this interesting description of the evolution of the of the enemies of Israel. And the enemies of Israel had the vision that we need to destroy Israel. Israel is foreign to this neighborhood, to the Middle East. We have to push them out. And their vision was that in stage one, our standing armies, the Egyptian standing army, the Syrian standing army, support from Iraq, from Saudi, the Jordanians, together we could just attack Israel and destroy Israel. And it was tried in 48, 47, 48, and 67. And I don't want to go into 56 is a different story. And 73, and it failed, and it failed, and it failed. And the attempt of standing armies to destroy the Israeli army and then to destroy Israel and to erase the presence of Zionists in the Middle East, that failed from that technique. So then...
You see this as relevant to the greatest mistake or the greatest success for the war?
Oh, I'm getting there.
Okay, fine.
I'm getting there. I want to build...
No, please
why
build
it's a tragedy.
It.
Sorry.
Build it.
Yeah. So, but when that failed, in parallel, there was always terrorist attacks. terrorist attacks were the attempt to weaken Israel.
Mm-hmm.
With standing armies will destroy Israel, right? But then strategy number 2 came in, where terrorism became not the sideshow, but the main show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Iran's strategy. And Iran's strategy, Qasem Soleimani specifically, from the IRGC, they had this very interesting idea of, well, if we try to hurt Israel through armies and through terrorism, let's unite the first 2 stages. An army of terrorists, stage 1 and stage 2 combined. Now, an army of terrorists, because what terrorism does, it attacks civilians, and then it hides among civilians. So it's unethical offense because they attack civilians, and it's unethical defense because they hide between civilians. But the startup of an army of terrorists, that is, besides ISIS, it's unprecedented. It has no real precedent, because an army is supposed to protect civilians, and here we have real armies with 40,000 soldiers. Let's say if you were talking about Hezbollah or Radwan, like real divisions with a structure and command and intelligence and a certain arm of drones and like a real army, but not an army that protects civilians. An army that, as an army, is protected by civilians. So this vicious startup of combining army and terrorism and creating an army of terrorists was designed to create a tragedy. And here's the tragedy. This is how Hamas designed the war to begin with. In October 7th, thus, and then it goes and hides beneath civilians in the underground of Gaza, right? Now, and then it knows something. Israel has 2 bad options. Bad option number 1 is not to attack Hamas, which means Hamas developed how to do the perfect murder. You could murder and get away with if you hide beneath civilians. Option number 2 is to destroy Hamas, which means you have to cut through civilians.
Mm-hmm.
Morally, they're both bad options, which is a tragedy. Israel did not have to choose. When we chose to destroy Hamas, we didn't choose the bad option over the good option. We chose the bad option over the worse option. That's what we did. That's why it's a tragedy. But the way it was designed by Hamas is the following. And Hamas understood something about asymmetric warfare. And that is, let's say a war is a car. And victory is the destination. And the fuel, the gas tank, is international legitimacy. And while you're driving to your destination, you're running out of legitimacy. You're running out of gas. Like while we're trying to destroy Hamas, we have to cut through civilians. And that's ruining the legitimacy for the war.
So is this a mistake on Israel's part?
No, it's not a mistake. It's a tragedy designed by Hamas. And here's the big question. What will happen first? Will we reach a destination before we run out of gas?
Uh-huh.
Or will we run out of gas before we reach destination? And Hamas's whole idea was that Israel will run out of legitimacy before it destroys Hamas.
So I have 2 questions. One of them is...
So it was designed as a tragedy.
So I have 2 questions. One of them is on what you're talking about, and the other one is trying to press you a little bit more about what's the mistake that Israel's made. Meaning, because you're describing what you said as the greatest tragedy, not necessarily Israel's greatest mistake in the war. I guess I'll start there, and then I'll follow up with the content of what you're describing now. Actually, we'll do the reverse. Meaning, what I find interesting about what you're saying is you're setting up a binary where either Israel totally neglects Hamas or they entirely go after Hamas, and in that binary, either civilians are totally unharmed or civilians are totally harmed. But has the international community and many reporters and journalists also kind of acknowledged a middle ground where the legitimacy and the sense of blame on Israel has changed over the last 1.75 years? That where Israel is today in going after Hamas and the civilian casualties is not necessarily where it was 1 year ago. Meaning there is a middle ground where Israel can go after Hamas and then at the same time have to recognize when is the limits of civilian casualties beyond what the actual gain is in military feats.
So that's a big question. I would say I kind of forget timing, okay? But when did we start Malkevot Gidon?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
I think like months.
Yeah. So,
Question mark for the
question
viewers.
mark. Now, I think that I think a better idea for Israel is that the way this government understood the relationship between liberating and bringing home our brothers from Gaza and destroying Hamas,
Doing the soldiers or the Chatufim?
the Chatufim, our brothers, Chatufim,
Oh, okay, fine.
and bringing back the hostages and bringing back and destroying Hamas, the way they managed, at one point, I think they didn't understand I think at one point, this like maybe, I forget the timing, maybe 3-4 months ago, after the first ceasefire after the last deal was over, it went into the Mifleget Gidon operation.
Gideon's chariot, yeah.
Yeah. That, I think, at that point, after we dismantled 24 battalions of Hamas and destroyed their leadership and hit their infrastructure so powerfully, that was a moment to bring back the Chatufim.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a mistake, and I'll try to explain why.
Briefly, if possible.
What?
Briefly, if possible.
Briefly, impossible, if possible. That think about it. If what would have happened if Hassan Nasrallah would have had 4 hostages with him in the bunker in the south of Beirut? I think he would have been alive today. You agree with me?
I'm not sure.
I think he would have been alive. I think he had 4 of our hostages with him in the bunker. I think he was alive. And you know what? If he had 10 hostages, do you agree he was alive? He would have been alive?
I don't know. I guess I have to let yourself get the spotlight for this interview.
I think Nasrallah would have been alive today. Now that's an interesting thought, because one of the reasons.
Well, do we have actual knowledge about how the Chatufim factor in to? I mean, there have been hostages who have been killed in airstrikes.
Yes, but the way our army works, it maps out where it thinks high probability of Chatufim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of our hostages. And it creates, and then it measures a few kilometers from those points, and it says, okay, this is an area where we're very, very careful, where we don't touch. So which means, and I think they have different ways to measure probability and distances, which means we're very, very careful where there is Chatufim, where there's hostages, which means that our ability to dismantle Hamas is very limited because we know that we have hostages there. So what would this mean? This means that now, imagine the following scenario. We bring the hostages home. And then a year from now, a year and a half ago, in a surprise attack, we hit Hamas. Let them come out of the tunnels. We hit Hamas. Then you hit Hamas when Israel is united behind this war, and we're not limited by our hostages.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this war, if it continues, is a problematic war because Israel is not united behind this war at this stage, and Israel doesn't know how to win wars that Israelis don't stand united behind. Look at Lebanon 1, for example, and the 82 version of Lebanon. And we have the Chatufim. So I think bringing the hostages back home is not instead of victory in dismantling Hamas. It's a precondition for victory in dismantling Hamas. But the difference is that it will take time.
And that was a mistake on Israel's part.
So that was a big. I think that wasn't handled. I think just the reason why for that mistake is that many Israelis want victory now, and the only way to destroy Hamas is to bring the hostages home, and then victory in a year and a half, 2 years from now. Or 3, I don't know, whatever it is. So just like the left got it wrong in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s, when it says peace now. The only peace that's possible is the peace that's in the future. I think this government got it wrong when it said victory now, victory over Hamas now. The only victory, the real victory that's possible, is a victory that takes a longer time to achieve.
So I want to shift our conversation a little bit and ask more personally, how have your religious views changed since October 7th?
I'll be honest, they didn't change.
What do you mean?
They didn't change because, you would say, I'm Maimonidean in my theology. Which means, I think, in the deepest sense, that we are commanded by God to hold on to ignorance regarding God. So, like, to if anybody says, okay, well, how let's see. On the one hand, how did October 7th happen? How did bad things happen to good people? How can God do that? Like that kind of a question, that's like, that assumes that you have knowledge about God. There's certain things that God doesn't do, and he wasn't supposed to do this. Well, I don't know anything about God. I don't have God. I have no idea how God works. And then some people say, wow, the miracle of the 12-day war. We must have done. I have no idea how God works. So, because I think that the way Rambam understands monotheism is like this. There's the way I think Rambam understands religion is the following. There's two versions of religion, and Rambam was very judgmental. There's a more distorted version of religion, and then there is the real version of religion. This is my modern to be judgmental, okay? And he says the distorted version of religion is the thought is that religion is there to offer you comfort, to give you a narrative, to give you explanation, to liberate you from the anxiety that comes from uncertainty. Okay, so, but the best form of religion is not about calming your uncertainty. It's not about giving you the illusion of control and certainty, but it's about training your mind to accept uncertainty. And we're living in a world with radical uncertainty. In the Guide for the Perplexed, the guide has 3 parts. In part 1, chapter 32, he says, Rabbi Akiva, the great scholar from the Mishnah, it says that in Masechet Chagiga and Traktat Chagiga, he enters the Pardes. Now the Pardes is like, according to Rambam, the area of like divine knowledge. Okay. And it says, when Nichnas b'shalom v'yatza b'shalom, he entered, I guess you might say, with peace and exited with peace. That would be a translation. But Rambam understands it differently. Shalom milshon shleimut.
Wholeness or perfection.
Wholeness or perfection. So he asks, what was Rabbi Akiva's quality that he reached human perfection? And his answer is, I'm quoting now from a Hebrew translation. I don't know how it's translated to English. Shene'etzar b'mekom hasafek.
That he like stopped or...
He stopped in the location of uncertainty. Imagine a meter, like a yard over a yard, a square yard of uncertainty, and to stand there where you don't know. So Rabbi Akiva's perfection is not that he reached the truth, but he reached the moment that he knew that he doesn't know the truth. And that's what, now if God is transcendent and beyond our understanding, that means that we're living in, and God is somehow governing what's happening. It means that we live in radical uncertainty. And radical uncertainty means, so ever since October 7th, I think it didn't change. I didn't have any theological...
It may have brought it to life in a different way.
But it brought the idea that we have this tradition that's training our mind to live with mystery, to live with enigma, to live in uncertainty that became more important than before.
That's very beautiful, and we're probably going to come back to that with a later question. But I'm tempted. The problem I always run into is that we have 18 questions and only so much time, but amazing. Staying in the personal realm for a moment as we shift to a little bit more of a societal view, what do you look for in deciding which Knesset party to vote for? And to some people of American side, them get all flustered. I'm not asking which party you vote for unless you want to say, but just what you look for, what are the things that you consider?
At this moment, in Israel, just like in many countries in the world, Israel's polarized. Jonathan Haidt calls polarization a mind virus. It's a virus that will infect your mind. You start imagining society divided into 2 parts. And one is good and the other is evil. Okay? Now this happened to Brazil, happened to Argentina, happened to the United States of America, it's also happened to Israel. We caught the virus. Right? And okay, so in Israel now there's like two camps, and one camp claims that they are the national camp, and the other camp is the liberal democratic camp, and one is Jewish, and one is Jerusalem, and one is Tel Aviv. Like we have to imagine there's two camps. Now here's, I think, a very important question here's an important question. You ask an Israeli or a political leader, what's the greatest threat to the future of Israel? Some would say the other side. Like if I'm on the left, it's the right, the left. The people on the other side of this fight, that's the greatest threat to the future of Israel. And some Israelis would answer you know what the greatest threat to the future of Israel is? The fight itself. I think we should only vote for parties that think that the fight is more dangerous than the people on the other side of this fight. Which has a big nafkamina. How do you say nafkamina?
Practical difference.
This has a major practical implication. Because if you think that the greatest threat to Israel is the people on the other side of this fight, like if I'm a right winger, the people on the left, they're the greatest threat to the future of Israel. If that's my calculation, that's how I calculate risk. So what I have to do is I have to break them. I have to destroy them to save Israel. There's only one problem. The people on the other side are thinking exactly the same thing about me while I'm thinking that. So while we're both trying to save Israel, we're destroying it. What happens if in my calculation the greatest risk is not the people on the other side of this fight, but the fight itself? So now my goal is not to destroy them, but to find a way to compromise with them. And the parties that I believe are going to win the next elections are the people who are going to call for compromise.
Do you think so?
Yes.
But isn't Bibi leading at the polls? Meaning, unless you think that the Likud party is embodying that in certain
Now, I think Bibi has a very big decision to make now. Till now, Bibi was leading, his voice was, vote for me, because I could destroy the elites, the deep state, the whatever, the left, the whatever. I'll save Israel from the left. And some people on the left saying, we'll save Israel from, okay. Is Bibi after this victory over Iran, and now Bibi that wants to leverage the victory of Iran to do to Iran what Iran did to Israel? Iran did to Israel build an axis of proxies to isolate Israel. The Abraham Accords about building an axis of countries to isolate Iran. And that completes the V'nahafochu, to do to Iran exactly what Iran did to Israel. And there'll be complete victory. And for that, he needs new coalitions. Because the far right I don't think he'd go with the far right to that kind of an idea.
But do you think? Are you saying that Bibi is against the people of Israel want Bibi, meaning because he's against the fight itself?
I'm saying many people on the right voted for Bibi because they believed that the greatest threat are the people that are protesting against Bibi. But I do think it's possible that Bibi will change. I hope it'll change. I don't know. That's why the Bibi question is always a trick question. So. Because how do you read Bibi and where's Bibi going? But I do think that if Bibi will run on a platform, vote for me, I'll destroy the other side, he'll lose the elections. I also think anybody on the other side that will say, vote for me, will really get Bibi this time, they'll lose the elections.
Well, isn't that kind of what he's doing with how he's treated his trial and how he's dealt with the
that's exactly how he's been conducting himself till now.
But then why would he still be leading in the polls if that's what Israelis are after? If Israelis are after someone against the fight.
I don't think he's leading in the polls.
You don't think so? I thought that recent numbers were saying, especially after Iran, that he was.
Yes, but he's still not. I think he's not leading in the polls.
Do you know who is leading?
Naftali.
Oh, interesting.
I think Naftali's still leading in the polls. I guess it's kind of close. But just imagine what maybe will happen if Bibi uses his talent not to divide Israel but to unite Israel, he'll win the elections. Because then he'll win the elections. So right now, it's in Bibi's political interest to become. I'm not saying he'll become a uniter.
Yeah. I understand.
Maybe things are bigger than him. Maybe habit is bigger than him.
But if he does, you're saying that will expedite his success.
Yes, and if he won't, I think somebody else will take over. I think the next elections will be won, but I think most Israelis are yearning for unity, and which means that Israel might be able to be a country that changes the laws of physics. The laws of physics. In polarized societies, the dividers always win. Can Israel be the first post-polarized society? The first society that managed to come out like we thought it wasn't true. We thought we came out of COVID first. It wasn't. But this plague of polarization, can be the first country out of it? Can we leverage this moment in history? I'm not saying we will, I'm saying we can.
Which is more important for Israel, Judaism or democracy?
I'll try to be. If you ask, how did Israel defeat Iran now? I mean, not defeat. I mean, that great success we had in the past 12 years. It's a combination of two things. I mean, actually, it's three things. Innovation, right? Technological innovation. Right. This is the answer to your question.
Yeah.
Okay. Innovation, creativity, radical creativity, right? And courage. Radical courage. Now you ask, where does innovation come from? Innovation comes from being a liberal society, where people could think freely. That's how you become the startup nation, an innovative society. Where does creativity come from? From individualism, from not trying to conform to the party line. These are democratic values. Where does courage come from? Where does resilience come from? That comes from being Jewish. That comes being connected to a tradition, to a story that's bigger than yourself, and you're willing to sacrifice yourself for something bigger than yourself. Israel has been successful in this war because it's hybrid, because it's a Jewish democracy. That's what hit Iran in the face. That's what hit the proxies in the face. Our innovation, creativity, courage, resilience. Courage and resilience comes from being Jewish, comes from being connected to a collective. Innovation, creativity comes from individualism. Israel we're hybrids, collectivist individualists, liberal and national, Jewish democracy. And that's why I believe the yin and yang as a symbol, where the yin, where the whole is not where the yin defeats the yang or yang defeats the yang, but it's the combination of yin and yang. That's Israel. Jewish democracy.
What role should the Israeli government have in religious matters?
I think it's best for religion that the government has a minimum role. There is the famous Alexis de Tocqueville, where he goes to America in the 19th century. French observer goes to America and he realizes that Americans are so religious. They love God. They have so much piety. They're so religious. And he realized how they're so religious and it's so important for them to keep separation between church and state. And he comes with the conclusion that Americans are so religious, not although there's separation of church from state, but because there's separation from church from state. And his theory is the following. People have a natural, healthy suspicion and sometimes even aggression towards political power. That's healthy. Where power is concentrated, we're suspicious, and sometimes we're aggressive, like stay out of my life. That's healthy. But when religion is married to political power, so the aggression we have towards politics spills over to religion. And the suspicion we have over regarding politics spills over to religion. That was de Tocqueville's theory. Israel proves it's a reality. When politics is too much in religion, when religion uses the power of politics to promote itself, so the suspicion towards politics turns into suspicion against religion. So I think, I'm not saying Judaism is not the Protestant religion, so it's not a good analogy. So we can't separate synagogue from state, but we definitely have to create a larger distance between synagogue and state, not only for the benefit of the state, but for the benefit of Judaism, of Yiddishkeit, of the synagogue. If we want to promote Judaism, we have to it's not through legislation, but through conversation, through, without using political power. That's the way Israelis, many Israelis, have a very instinctive draw to Jewish tradition. Most Israelis want to have an intimate connection with their past and their tradition. They don't want to be controlled by tradition. They want to be connected to tradition. Most Israelis are not going to be Orthodox, frum religious Jews, but they can be something else. They can be something like, if you see like the Mizrahi Masulti, like you're connected to tradition. You're not obeying tradition. It's a different body language. And that's where most Israelis could be going. But when they have an allergic reaction to politics and politics is connected to religion, that is blocking the natural tendency of Israelis to be more traditional.
Mhm. Should Israel treat its Jewish and non-Jewish citizens the same?
Of course. Of course. I mean, as individuals, completely. Israel is it's the national home for one nation, right? For the Jewish people. But it's the democratic home for every individual that is citizens. You see this distinction?
Mhm.
As individuals, we're all equal, but as a collective, it's the nation state of only one collective. So the Tikva says Nefesh Yehudi Homia, which means the national anthem does not represent every Israeli.
Mhm.
But when it comes to rights, we have to have equal rights, of course.
Now that Israel already exists, what's the purpose of Zionism?
Well, if Zionism is a project to create a state, the state is established, Zionism is over. That's if not the question. What is Zionism? Herzl had two different visions for Zionism. One he wrote in 1896 in a book called Judenstaat, the State of the Jews, creating a state. That's what it is. And the second he wrote in 1902 called Altneuland. Now, very briefly, these are two different Zionisms, and he wrote, and both came from the mind of one person, of Theodor Herzl. The first Zionism, 1896, is like this: the world is a hostile place for Jews. It's a scary place for Jews. We need a Jewish state because of anti-Semitism. 1902, in Altneuland, he says the world has problems, has serious problems. That's how the Jews have to create a state in order to innovate and experiment in different ideas of government and technology, and in order to come up with solutions for the problems of the world. So the version number one, the world is dangerous, we have to escape the world. Version number two, the world has problems, we have to heal the world. I would say Zionism number one is stage one of Zionism. And stage one of Zionism will end when Israelis will feel safe in Israel. Maybe this war, maybe, we don't know yet. Maybe this war will be seen one day as the war that made Israelis feel really safe in Israel. If this leads to peace in the Middle East and Abraham Accords expanding, and that existential threat created by Iran is dismantled and no new threat comes in, so maybe we'll be moving from the Zionism of Medinat Yehudim, of the state of the Jews, of Herzl, to the Zionism of Altneuland. Zionism doesn't ask how do we protect Jews from a crazy, hostile, anti-Semitic world, but Zionism asks how do we elevate how do we use our innovation in order to heal the world. That might be a real shift that we might be able to be witnessing in our lifetime.
But wouldn't you say that Israel is quite far from that second goal?
Well, I think we are so obsessed with survival. I'll give you even more. The reason why Bibi keeps winning is because Bibi really, really captures that anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
The Jewish people are under threat. Israel is under threat. We have to be tough. We have to trust no one. And I would say, if it's true that if this war and the peace that comes after this war, something regional, a regional alliance is created after this war, brings down that existential anxiety, this would also probably be the end of the Netanyahu period.
Mm-hmm.
The end of the Netanyahu period is also the end of stage one of Zionism, the Zionism of survival. And then a new conversation begins, the Zionism of inspiration. It's a new conversation. It's a different type of leadership. It's different. So I don't know are we in that tectonic shift as we're talking? It's hard, Chazal, the rabbis, when they ask after the Hanukkah miracle. So they ask, are we going to celebrate? Are we going to turn this into a chag, into
A holiday.
a holiday, into Hanukkah? And Rav Soloveitchik observes that the answer says, the Chazal say, let's decide next year. Let's wait a year. So we have perspective. So everything I'm talking about, I notice, we need perspective to know if this stuff is right.
Kind of like said in the beginning, like it's hard to speak about history when you're in history.
So this is all speculative, but it's possible we're in a tectonic moment, where things are really changing and we're moving from the first stage of Zionism to the second stage of Zionism.
Is opposing Zionism inherently anti-Semitic?
No, you could be but it could be. It could be.
Do you feel like people understand the distinction well?
Here's an attempt to oppose Zionism that's not anti-Semitic. If you say, the idea of nation-state is a bad idea, it always nationalism brings the worst out of human beings. Some people think nationalism always leads to xenophobia, always to fascism. Nation-states are a bad idea. Zionism is the idea that the Jews deserve a nation-state. I'm against nation-states, so I'm against Zionism. That's not anti-Semitic. But if you say that every nation has the right for self-determination, every nation deserves a state, the Jews don't, that's anti-Semitism. Because if I say, let's say an individual right, like the right to vote. Okay, if I say everybody has the right to vote as individuals, the Jews don't, that's anti-Semitism, right? So if you discriminate against Jews on an individual level, it's anti-Semitism. If you discriminate against Jews on a collective level, that's also anti-Semitism.
But so how would you fit that model into, take a student from Columbia University. They see what's happening with the Israel-Hamas war. They see the pictures coming out of Gaza of people who are killed, some people who are Hamas, some people who are civilians. They look at that and they say, wow, I contextualize this, in their view, in a history of Zionism displacing Palestinians. And to me, this national movement is fundamentally tameh, it's impure, it's bad, and it's no good, there's no coming back, and therefore I'm opposed to it. Where does that fit into your model? Meaning, where does the nuance fit in, where it's not so ideologically distilled, but it does kind of try to straddle the line between being against Zionism in particular without being against national movements as a whole, or without even considering national movements as a whole?
Can you repeat your question?
How would you fit your model into a student at Columbia who isn't concerned, who may not be concerned with nation states in general, but is looking at Zionism and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and is defining Zionism by its history as they understand it?
Meaning if they say, okay, Zionism history is a Zionism, so I would just say, I like to have a conversation with him or her about history. Right? Now, do they know their history? Do they know that the Palestinians were offered an independent state for themselves in 1937, and they rejected it? In 1947, and they rejected it. And the Palestinians are stateless today not because of Israeli aggression, because of Palestinian refusal. Do they know that? Like, I would just go into history with them. Okay, just have a conversation. Do they know this?
Is the IDF the world's most moral army?
I'm not crazy about that claim.
Do you think it's true?
I don't know.
Why don't you like the claim?
What?
Why don't you like the claim? How's probably coming after you after this interview?
Because I know there's research that shows that maybe the IDF makes more effort to avoid civilians. I mean, I don't know the data. I know there's some research that supports that, but I don't like that claim so much. It's about morality is not so morality at its best. It's always about managing a conflict between values. I'll give you an example. In Tohar, in Ruach Tzahal. Ruach Tzahal is the IDF's...
The code of ethics or the...
our code of ethics. So you have one value called Chaye Adam, which means if you're a commander, you're morally obligated to do everything you can to protect your soldiers. Okay? And if you do something that will, if you put them under threat for no good reason, that's unethical. There's another value there called tohar haneshek, which is implications you have to do everything you can in order to minimize the damage for civilians or people who don't threaten you. Okay, so now you're in Gaza and somebody is aiming an RPG missile at you from a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
If you start shooting towards that hospital, you're violating tohar haneshek. Civilians will die. If you don't, you're violating chaye adam. Your soldiers will be under threat. So what's the right thing to do? You have to sacrifice a moral value in order to implement a moral value. That's a situation. So what is the most moral country? Like, how do you calculate morality? It's so complicated. It's not a competition. So my question is, so my take on the Israeli army, because I have many conversations and lectures in the Israeli military about how do you balance values? How do you think about this? To be ethical, it's not only about being a good person, it's about being a professional commander.
Mm-hmm.
And the more professional we are, the more successful we are in the battlefield, and the more moral we are. And in moments of fatigue, and by this war is going on for a long time, you're less professional in the battlefield. You're also less professional moral. So it's a constant on. You have to be very alert moral. It's very tough. It's very hard. And I know that I could say the following: that our commanders are doing doing the best. And is every soldier always at his best ethical behavior? After a year of 10 months of war and after all this fatigue kicking in, I'm sure it's much more complicated now.
If you were making the case for Israel, where would you begin?
In the 20th century, because we have to redefine what makes Israel unique, special, and what Zionists used to call a light into the nations. And it used to be that it was socialism. For Ben Gurion and Berl Katznelson, and the idea that we will teach the world how to really do socialism, not like Lenin, not like Stalin, how to do really socialism, not top down, but bottom up, the kibbutz, not using power, but and in the 50s and 60s, people came from all over the world to visit the kibbutz, to volunteer in kibbutzim, to see the Israeli brand of socialism. Then we've changed a bit. We've changed throughout time. In the 90s and 21st century, people come all over the world to see the startup nation. A different model of what it means to light into the nations. Innovation, individual. People came from all over the world to visit Mobilai, to visit not the miracle of socialism, a kibbutz, but the miracle of Israeli capitalism. I think we should think about it differently now. In the 19th century, 20th century, collectivist societies failed. Mao in China and Stalin in Russia, collectivist Cambodia, collectivist experiments failed. And that led towards the end of the 20th century, different people saying, wow, collectivism failed, individualism, American liberalism, capitalism, that's the idea that won, and history is over, and we know who lost and who won. That's Francis Fukuyama's famous
the end of history.
The end of history. History. I think what we're seeing now in America and in the Western civilization, we're seeing, if in the 20th century we saw the failure of collectivism, now we're seeing the failure of individualism that leads to loneliness, to lack of meaning, which increases polarization. You want to belong to a tribe. But as Rabbi Jonathan Zacks put political tribes, what puts them, the glue of political tribes, the glue of regular communities is love. If you belong to a community that ride bikes together, okay, so that's love for bike riding. If you go to shul, it's for love of kiddush or ritual. If it's whatever it is, communities, what unites the glue of community is love. The glue of political tribes is hate. And people that feel so lonely are looking for community, and that only increases the mind virus of polarization.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing all over. We're seeing the failure of individualism. I think what you see in Israel is Israel is a hybrid society. We are hyper individualists. You have to speak to only 2-3 Israelis to understand that you're talking to people that don't want to be told what to do. David Ben-Gurion said once, the worst job in the world is to be the prime minister of Israelis. And this is in the 50s, because you're the prime minister of 1 million prime ministers. Israelis are hyper. The whole Startup Nation book is about hyper individualism. And then, ever since October 7th, you see these same people building startups in Herzliya. You see them in Khan Yunis. 150 days in Khan Yunis. That's collectivism. If individualism is about self-fulfillment, collectivism is about self-sacrifice. And Israelis can move from one emotional mode of self-fulfillment to self-sacrifice. Oh, and then Miluim is over, so you're back to Beratzov Ashov so easily.
The back and forth.
Back and forth. So Israelis are hybrid emotionally. I mean, not all Israelis. I'm talking about mainstream Israelis. Not all Israelis. And also ideologically, they're Jewish democracy. Judaism is about collectivism. You're part of a collective. Democracy, you have individual rights. So the hybrid formula of Israel, Jewish democracy, is played out by so many Israelis, which are collectivist individualists. So I do think Israel has an important thing to show the world. After the failure of collectivism in the 20th century and the failure of individualism in the first quarter of the 21st century, Israel it's not about the kibbutz anymore, which is collectivism. It's not about the startup nation, which is individualism. It's about hybridism. It's about the holistic version of Israel, the yin yang of Israel. Mm-hmm. That's not the case for Israel. That's who Israel is. That's what Israel has. That's what Israel, and I think Israel has something. People in America, Jews in the world, which are living in individualistic societies, they're always told, or it always seems like there's a trade-off. For all my liberties that individualism offers me, there's a trade-off. The trade-off is that I have nothing to belong to. Nothing. I'm not in service of anything. And where there's no belonging, there is a weakened sense of meaning. And I always using that trade-off. Okay, so you want belonging and meaning? There's less rights, less liberalism. It's like there's a trade-off. Israel is living evidence there's no trade-off. Mm-hmm. That you could be liberal and national at the same time. That you could be hyper-individualistic and in service of your country at the same time. Mm-hmm. That's what Israel is. And I think in this war, we're starting to realize that's not only what we are, it's also our superpower. Because the individualism that creates the technology and the innovation and the ideas, and it's the collectivism, it's belonging to something bigger than yourself that creates the courage, the resilience, and we need both to defeat Iran. Mm-hmm. So we're realizing it's our superpower being hybrid, and I think that's I think how Israel. That's I think when you think about the next generation of Zionism, the Zionism of inspiration, not of survival. I think that's where it is. It's cultivating both pieces and showing that there's not a trade-off between them.
Mm-hmm. Can questioning the actions of Israel's government and army, even in the context of this war, can that be considered a valid form of love and patriotism?
Of course. Of course.
Mm-hmm.
You want Israel to be the best version of itself, and you feel that it's not the best version of itself. Of course. There was Rabbi David Hartman, Alev Shalom, he said, when you criticize Israel, he says, I want you to criticize me like my mother does, not like my mother-in-law does.
That's a good one.
No, I love my mother-in-law. That's nothing. But there's. But
you got to cover your own ground.
But the idea, when you criticize someone because you hate them, it means it's because you hate them, you criticize because you see the worst in them. But because you see the best in them, you criticize them. Because yes, so of course, criticizing Israeli government, Israelis do that all the time.
Do you think there's enough criticism of Israel from within Israel?
Within Israel? Of course.
So what do you think is the most legitimate criticism leveled against Israel? Not necessarily whether from within or from without.
Everything is legitimate. Everything is legitimate. So I'll say what's not. So because anything else is. Israel has the right to exist. Criticizing Israel criticizing Israel's right to exist is probably anti-Semitic. Unless you have a real abstract explanation, it's probably anti-Semitic. But people don't always realize that saying that Israel has the right to exist but doesn't have the right. But if you're also saying that Israel doesn't have the right to protect itself, I think that's almost like saying it doesn't have the right to exist. Mm-hmm. So as long as you believe, as long as our assumption is Israel has the right to exist and therefore the right to protect itself, because in this neighborhood, if you can't really protect yourself, you can't really exist. Besides that, now we can argue how we protect ourselves.
So are criticisms of apartheid or genocide legitimate in your eyes?
Yeah, no. Saying apartheid, genocide, that's saying that Israel does not have the right to exist.
Why?
Because the whole purpose of saying that Israel's very presence here is a crime.
Well, is that what they're saying? Meaning, are the people who allege... Meaning, the reason I bring such extreme examples is because you had said everything aside from saying... criticism of its right to exist.
No, because I kind of feel like saying that's...
Like, I think it's easier to do the question originally, which is
I think that's saying that Israel can't protect itself.
Why is that?
Because if to protect myself, because the tragedy that Hamas designed, building an army of terrorists, hiding beneath civilians, means that my only way to protect myself is entering this tragedy.
But that's not what all people are saying. Meaning there are people and there are organizations that have shifted over the course of the war. And I'm not saying that their claims are legitimate, but meaning if you want to the
genocide,
if you're going to say people from day one who said there's going to be genocide on October 8th, I totally hear what you're saying. But from what you were saying, the people who have said, let's say in September 2024...
I just have one question. Okay, yeah. So I assume the word genocide it comes from the numbers. It comes from the numbers of Palestinians that died.
Right? Well, not necessarily. Meaning there have been people who said it's because of intention or it's because of statements made. Meaning all this is genocide. This is not me defending the genocide claim.
Because genocide doesn't mean... I mean, if you're saying an act of a certain soldier in a certain place of Gaza was immoral, I could say that also. Of course.
No, but they are saying that on a systemic level, based on statements from Israeli ministers, based on statements from Netanyahu, based on policies taken.
If you're saying that there is a policy by Israel to target and kill Palestinians, first of all, it's just not true. It's just wrong. But if you dig deeper, you realize, Israel realized that the price of destroying Hamas was that civilians will die, and we were willing to pay that moral price in order to fulfill another moral obligation of protecting our lives. And it was a very complicated...
But isn't that what they would dispute? Meaning they would dispute whether or not these actions were legitimate or be necessary for Israel to...
So if you're saying it's possible to destroy... If you're saying we can't destroy Hamas, that's saying that Israel doesn't have the right to protect itself. And if you're saying there is a different way to destroy Hamas, while Hamas is hiding beneath population, so offer the alternative, and then we could measure it. I never heard somebody said this. Oh, you could just destroy Hamas in a sterile...
No, but meaning people's arguments have been that wanting to destroy Hamas is an impossibility. Meaning they say that it's impossible to destroy Hamas because it's a terrorist organization that's essentially an ideology where for every 10 people you kill, you've now like 100 are going to be born.
Well, destroying
tomorrow.
Hamas means three things. It means
I'm not looking to get to. I don't want to get lost so much in because this in itself could be a podcast episode to discuss. The merits or the meaning of destroying Hamas. I guess I mean just to go back to my original question. Just curious.
You know what? Maybe it's legitimate, but it's stupid.
Mm-hmm. So, but is there a claim that people make against Israel that many people may dismiss that you're like, actually, there is some legitimacy to that? I'm not saying the genocide claim. You may say, it's legitimate, but it's stupid. But is there a claim that people make towards Israel that some people are more apt to dismiss? That you say, you know what, I hear that claim, and I think there's legitimacy there.
Well, as I told you, I think we made mistakes regarding the hostages. And certain points, I do think that our military, it's hard to be judgmental about our military because if I was in military now for a year and 10 months, I think a lot of things you're seeing, there's the component of fatigue, which is it's very hard for people outside the army to see. how hard it is to fight a war for a year and 10 months on many, many levels and in many, many layers. But did our army intend to kill Palestinians? Absolutely not. Do we have do we make mistakes? Yes. Do we have individual soldiers that made more than mistakes but misbehaved? Yeah. I'm sure we did. I'm sure that happened.
What do you think the world misunderstands about Israelis?
I don't know. I mean, here's something interesting about Israelis. How not militant they are.
Mm.
It's very interesting. Usually when you see people that were in the military for a long time, they're very militant. They're like, oh, you know, rah, rah. You know, there's something militant about them, which is fine. I'm not judgmental. But you see Israelis that spent a year that were in Gaza and Lebanon, and then they get together. They're not militant. They're soft. They sing. They pull out their guitar. They're vulnerable. They're very vulnerable. This generation of Israelis is the toughest generation of Israelis ever. Shockingly tough. And so vulnerable. And so open. And they could speak about their emotions. It's just something so... And that's something I think many people don't know about Israelis. You assume these people that did what they did in Iran, Lebanon, Gaza, they're probably these macho... No, they're not. They're very balanced. They're very interesting. They're not only masculine, they're also feminine. There's something interesting there. It's a yin-yang.
Do you think peace between Israelis and Palestinians will happen within your lifetime?
No.
Why?
Well, I don't know. My lifetime is... I have no... Okay. I don't know how long I'm going to live for, but a lifetime. I want to change my answer. In the foreseeable future, no. Why? Because I think it's too much to ask for Palestinians. I don't blame the Palestinians. It's too much to ask from them. Asking the Palestinians to recognize the existence of a Jewish state in this land is actually asking them two different things. It's asking them to give up on what they believe is their religion. More than 50% of Palestinians believe in the following interpretation of Islam, that this land that is Waqf, it used to be owned and used to be Muslim, under Muslim sovereignty. And therefore it's Waqf, it's sacred land. And therefore it's illegitimate for a sovereign that's not Muslim to govern this land. Now Yusuf al-Qaradawi, one of the greatest poskim, like a great Sharia legislator, said that the only land in the world that statement is valid is Israel, is Palestine, what he calls Palestine. The Muslims used to also control Spain. He says, no, any foreign control over this land is a violation of Sharia. So if Palestinians say, we recognize Israeli sovereignty, that's turning their backs on the Sharia, on the halacha, the way most of them see it. That's one. Two, peace means they give up right of return, or effective right of return. Haq al-Auda. And the way they count, between 5 to 7 million Palestinians used to live here, and they don't live here anymore, they have to come home. And we're like, no, if peace means you're giving up on that, because that means we don't have a state of our own. So we're asking them to do two things for peace. We're asking them to give up on their solidarity and on their theology. To give up to turn their backs on 5 million refugees and to turn their backs on Sharia. Which means we're actually asking them, in order to achieve a statehood, liberty, political liberty, we're asking them to give up on their identity. Now, most Israelis don't see that. Most Jews don't see that. That the two-state solution, what we're asking them is, you sacrifice your identity, Muslim identity, Palestinian identity, and you'll get liberty. That's too much to ask for them. We shouldn't do that. We should bring the stakes down. Not ending the conflict, but speak about maybe short-term agreements. A hudna of 40 years. speak about, and it'll be violated here and there. It will be this conflict that's going to stay alive. I think it's possible to bring it down, to bring the temperature down. But any attempt to solve the conflict always amplifies that same conflict. That's the law of history ever since 1937.
I think that may be one of the only original answers I've heard. I mean, on the podcast to this question. Like I haven't heard anyone say anything similar. That's really interesting. What should happen with Gaza and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict after the war?
What should happen in Gaza?
Yeah.
There's many possibilities. I'll tell you what I think. I mean, from an Israeli perspective.
Yeah. What from your perspective?
From our perspective, we need two things. One, not to be there. I don't want our soldiers. I don't want Gaza to be our Vietnam. I don't want our soldiers to be patrolling Gaza and governing Palestinian population in Gaza. We don't want that. On the other hand, we can't let Hamas be built up, which means what we need is we don't want Israeli presence. We want Israeli access. Access means we have intel of a Palestinian planning an attack in Saja'iyah. We'll go into Saja'iyah, either by air, by drone, or special units, which means we need access, not presence. Now, what's the arrangement that will give us access without presence? What's the arrangement that will do that? There's many ways to think about that, but that's what's right for us. But here's a point that has to be made. For the Palestinians, as long as Hamas is in Gaza, Gaza will never be rebuilt. And here's why. To rebuild, you have to have foreign investment, like Saudi foreign investment. If you're in charge of the foundation of, it has a name, the foundation that they take their oil money and they make foreign investments, right? They're going to make investments now in the U.S. for your president. And are you American, by the way?
American Israeli.
Can I refer to you as an American just as a joke?
All right, go for it. Okay. I'll take the straight bullet.
Okay. Now, are you American? Okay. So,
are you American?
Yeah.
All the masks come off enough.
All the masks come off. Yeah. I was born and raised here, but yeah, I might be.
Yeah.
American citizen. And where was I?
You're talking about the investments.
Oh. So if Hamas is there, so you know with not low probability that Hamas will direct one day its missile at Israel. And what will Israel do? It will bomb Gaza, which means all your investment goes down the drain. Which means the risk is so high. If Hamas is there, no one will make that investment. So there's no real future for Palestinians if Hamas is there. Israel, by the way, has a future if Hamas is there. As long as we have access, we can mow the lawn.
So I'm actually interested in the first.
But for Palestinians, we need Hamas not to be there. That's what the people in the world don't understand. If you want the best for Palestine, Israel could find an arrangement that will be protected from Gaza. After this situation now, we could find an arrangement that we could protect it from Gaza without presence, but with access. But for the Palestinians, we need Hamas eradicated. Or else the Palestinians have no future.
I was actually going to ask on the first thing you were speaking about, are you scared about the support growing in Israel to build settlements in Gaza? Even in the government of those who support it.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's...
Why?
Because there's only a minority of Israelis that want it. The prime minister doesn't want. The majority of Israelis don't want it.
So I am curious, for the Israelis who say, we pulled out of Gaza in 2005, we uprooted Jewish homes and Jewish settlements, and look what we got 20 years later. Maybe resettling is the answer. How do you respond to that?
Well, let's think about this. The reason why Gaza is the way it is not because of the disengagement, but because of Oslo. Trying to explain this point. In the Oslo Accords in the 90s, Israel left the villages and the Palestinian towns and told them, okay, now you could build your own autonomy on your own. And what happened was, both in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and in Gaza, they started arming themselves. And all that exploded on Israel in the Second Intifada. And then, as a result, the Second Intifada, when Arik Sharon came into power, I'm talking now in 2002, I think it was March 2002, we went into the operation called Chomat Magen.
Okay.
Defensive shield? Defensive shield. Which means, but we did it only in Judea and Samaria. Our brigades entered Tulkarem and Jenin and Ramallah and Bethlehem. We entered the towns, and we dismantled the terrorist infrastructure in these towns back in 2002, 2003. And by the power of unity, it was Shimon Peres was the foreign minister, Arik Sharon was the prime minister, and really, when the icon of the right and the left unite, there's a lot we can do. In Israel's history, by the way, wars by national unity governments like the Six-Day War were successful. So we go into, so we do Chomat Magen, but we didn't do that in Gaza. We didn't do that back then in Gaza. And what happened as a result of Chomat Magen, not only did we dismantle the infrastructure of terrorism, we also somehow created the legitimacy to go back in whenever we wanted. We have intel, we go in, we take out the terrorists. And to do what Israelis call mowing the lawn. So while we dismantled the infrastructure and then mowed the lawn in Judea and Samaria, we didn't do that in Gaza. So the lawn just grew and grew and grew. You know what this war is? The Chomat Magen that we didn't do in Gaza in 2002, we had to do with a much more armed Gaza in 2023. Mm-hmm. So settlements in Gaza is not what creates the missing intel and the access. It goes back to Oslo. So if we come out of this war, where on the one hand we dismantle the infrastructure, and now we have access, like we go in and like in Lebanon with the Hezbollah. When we have intel, we bomb, right? If we have that, that would be the answer to our national security problems. That's the guarantee that October 7th won't happen. I don't really know how settlements in Gaza create security. I mean, there is a story, but tell me how it goes. Let's be practical about this, how this goes. Military access in Gaza is what you need, not Jewish presence. Mm-hmm. I mean, you want Jewish presence for other reasons, for prophetic, biblical, messianic, other narratives, which I understand them. But for security reasons, you just need access.
Mm-hmm. Where do you identify on Israel's political and religious spectrum? And do you have any friends on the quote-unquote other side?
Well, I'm a centrist, but let me just explain what a centrist means. Centrist doesn't mean I'm in between the right and the left. It means I internalize chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes. Chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes, he speaks about there's a time for everything. There's a time to speak, there's a time to be silent. There's a time for peace, there's a time for war. There's a time to hug, there's a time to stay away, right? And he concludes and he says that everything has its time, everything has its moment. Now, if you translate this politically, I have a problem with ideologues. I think ideology brings down your political IQ. Ideologues have a tendency to think that they have an idea and it's always right. It's always right. If you're a militant, if you're a militarist, so using force will solve all your problems. You're a pacifist, so talking will solve all your problems. If you're a capitalist, just privatize. The market will solve your problems. If you're a socialist, just nationalize. And chapter 3 in Ecclesiastes says something else. It says, it's not that one idea is wrong, the other idea is right. All ideas are right, all ideas are wrong. We have to ask a different question. It's not what's the right idea, ask what's the right time. Mm-hmm. And I'm a centrist because I believe that the right has great ideas, the left has great ideas. I don't like that ideas are nifsalim. How do you say nifsalim?
Like they're puzzled, they're discarded. Or
I don't like that ideas are discarded because of their brand. Oh, it's left, so I'm against it. Oh, it's right, so yeah. That's what happened. That's political IQ goes down when you discard.
Yeah.
Political IQ goes down when you discard an idea just because of its brand, not because of its content. So I think all idea now. So I just want to ask. So I want to be flexible enough to ask, what's the right idea for this time?
And religiously.
I think I shared with you some theological Maimonidean insights in the beginning.
Do you have an idea? Do you identify anywhere religiously? Like what's?
No.
And do you have any friends on the quote unquote other side?
Well, since I'm a centrist, so I have friends which I learn from, listen to, on both sides.
Lovely. And
I would say if you want to really, really, really push me, at this moment,
I can push you. I'll push you
At
a little bit. I'll push you.
at this moment, I would say I'm leaning more to the right, but not because I'm a right winger.
Because now
Being
you
a
think the
right winger turns an idea into an identity.
Mm-hmm.
And once ideas become from what you think to who you are, so they blind you from reality.
Mm-hmm.
I want my eyes to be liberated from ideas.
Mm.
So I would say now I'm centrist, leaning to the right, but it's not an identity. I'm not
It's
a
because
right
in this
winger.
moment you see.
Because this moment I think
You think ideas on the right seem to be more
not the
suited
far
for the
right.
reality.
Yeah.
And for our last question, do you have more hope or fear for Israel and the Jewish people?
I have a lot of hope for Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
The Jewish people is bigger. I think that Israel might be standing in front of a massive opportunity, while the Jewish world might be standing in front of a massive crisis.
Mm. What's the opportunity? What's the crisis?
But another thing, I think the bigger question is humanity. Because I think the rise of AI and what might lead to AGI, artificial general intelligence, and to super intelligence, it's so big, so terrifying, and it might happen in the near few years. So I'm terrified regarding humanity and optimistic regarding Israel. The problem is Israel's part of humanity. So how do you put that together?
Hopefully, you can guide them forward.